Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Almasian, as Steve just said. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement and Participation at the College of Nursing. We're thrilled you could join us. Oops, sorry, lost my notes here. We're thrilled you could join us for this third installment of On Duty, our webinar series featuring faculty and alumni experts on topics relevant to nursing issues of the day. I know you're going to enjoy hearing from today's speaker, Phoenix Matthews, who holds the Helen K. Grace Endowed Diversity Faculty Scholar position and who is our Associate Dean for Equity and Inclusion at the UIC College of Nursing. Dr. Matthews is a professor and licensed clinical psychologist who is internationally known for the research on health disparities experienced by racial and ethnic minorities. Primarily, the research focuses on the use of community-based and culturally targeted health promotion interventions to reduce risk factors associated with cancer disparities, including smoking cessation treatments. They are currently the principal investigator for 2 NIH-funded grants related to lung cancer disparities. Dr. Matthews is also co-investigator for 2 NIH-funded pipeline development grants aimed at reducing health inequalities. Until recently, they were also co-director of the Recruitment and Retention Program at UIC's Center for Clinical and Translational Science. Now, as the college's first Associate Dean for Equity and Inclusion, Dr. Matthews is leading our efforts to create a more inclusive and equitable environment with a high level of diversity in the student body, as well as among staff and faculty. There is no one in the UIC College of Nursing with a broader or deeper perspective on why we can and must diversify the nursing profession. Please welcome Dr. Phoenix Matthews.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much, Steve, for the invitation, and thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction. I look forward to talking with you and spending some time talking about one of the areas that is really central to the work that I've been doing over the past 5 years as it relates to a pipeline development program aimed to diversify the health sciences areas. So what I'd like to talk with you about today is diversification of the nursing workforce, the role of social, emotional, and contextual factors in terms of achieving success. So just as a brief overview, where we'll be discussing the national nursing shortage, the AANC workforce development goals, the relationship of those workforce development goals with goals related to equity and inclusion, and then where we are as a college in some of our initiatives. So let's start with a very grim sort of portrayal of where we are with our current national health crisis. Each of you are well aware that we are approaching 400,000 deaths that have occurred over the last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as of data just very recently, we are averaging nearly 25,000 deaths per week. So this is something that is a health crisis that's been with us for a year now and will be continuing to be grappling with for probably the next several years to come. As we're well aware, nurses are at the front line of this national health crisis in terms of providing direct patient care, staffing the testing centers, as well as now staffing the vaccination clinics. But what's been highlighted by a former alumni, Janice Phillips, is that although nurses are very vocal and present in providing services for this pandemic, nurses have been very instrumental in addressing multiple health crises over the years. So one of the things that has happened during this pandemic is that it has really highlighted what we have known as a discipline for a couple of decades, and that is the dramatic shortage of nursing workforce and staff. What we see day after day in the news is a workforce that is overworked, understaffed, and really struggling to care for the Americans who are impacted by the virus. To address what we're seeing now very acutely, this issue of the workforce development, the National Institutes of Health, as well as the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, have been really focused on issues of pipeline development. So the IOM in 2010 really called for increasing the numbers of highly trained nurses at all levels, And more recently, the AACN called for not only increasing overall numbers of nursing, but the overall diversity of the nursing work field. Why is that a requirement? Well, if you take a look at some of the current data related to the current nursing workforce, you'll see some of the reasons why. Uh, Fewer than 10% of nurses at this point identify as male. And despite the growing diversity of the United States, about 75% of all nurses in the hospital settings are white. And as we can see from the diversity data, so the gender data, typically white females. Okay, so there are a number of reasons why we need to address the overall shortage as well as the lack of diversity. And I'll sort of highlight with a few of those rationales, how they relate to it. The first is that we have a dramatically changing demographics in the United States. In the next 20, 25 years, the United States will be fully, whites will represent less than 50% of the population, and with a growing diversity of populations from other groups, including Hispanic, African American, Asians, and individuals who identify as multiracial. So diversification is requirement to reflect the growing diversity of the US population. Now, the second reason why diversity is required is that we continue to face ongoing health inequalities based on race and ethnicity, and that we need to have a nursing workforce who, again, represents those communities that are most negatively impacted by health inequalities. We see that Chicago is very similar to the the national data as it relates to the disproportionate impact among African Americans and Latinx populations as it relates to death associated with COVID. We know that there are a number of structural factors that are contributing to ongoing health inequalities. The social determinants of health really point to the issues associated with poor access to healthcare infrastructure, as well as highly qualified health care services, as contributing to the ongoing health inequalities that we see in the United States as well as Chicago. So again, the second reason is that a diversification of the nursing workforce addresses an important social determinant of health. A third and equally important is that workplace diversity is associated with high levels of productivity, innovation, as well as job satisfaction. So there are a range of factors that are really related to the issue of diversity being central to the workforce development needs. So where are we, and as one of the institutions that's responsible for educating some of the largest numbers of nurses in Illinois, where are we with our diversity goals as it relates to the pipeline development? Well, all of us are well aware of the mission of the College of Nursing, and embedded in that is the education of future leaders from diverse backgrounds. In 2010, the college established its first diversity strategic plan, and what happened there was that they really put into place a series of broad diversity goals. The first one of them was to establish a structure that commits to the fundamental role of diversity in the college, to recruit and retain a diverse student body, faculty, and staff, to promote a climate of diversity and equity and inclusion, to name just a few. So how are we doing in the college? Well, we've made tremendous strides in terms of that establishment of that infrastructure. We moved from having a chief diversity officer to, in January of this last year, establishing an Office of Equity and Inclusion that's inclusive of the Associate Dean position, the Equity and Inclusion Committee that's staffed by faculty, students, and staff in the college, as well as our Urban Health Program, which is led by Sharice Smith. So those three programs constitute the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and the overall goals and objectives are to increase diversity, improve the educational and work environments, enhance the curriculum, as well as to continue with training and education of both faculty, students, and staff as it relates to issues of diversity. As you can see for some of these data here, we have come a long way since since 2010, when the Diversity Strategic Plan was put in place. We've had almost a 50% increase in our overall diversity in the College of Nursing. Although we are somewhat short of our diversity goals as it relates to underrepresented minority populations. And in nursing, those are inclusive of Hispanic, Latinx populations, African Americans, and males. Even though we're short of those identified goals, again, over that past decade, we've seen about a 50% increase in representation. So those are very positive indeed. Diversity and issues of equity and inclusion are very much central, have become front and center to a lot of the work that we have done, we're doing currently in the college, and there's a lot more intentionality around that work as it relates to our statements, our website, as well as the work that you'll see happening in the college. So while we're making a lot of progress, as one of our greatest presidents have said, it's important to acknowledge process, but it's also equally important to acknowledge how far that how far left we have to go. So things are better, but still not good enough. We can improve. And so the rest of the presentation, I'll focus on areas in which I feel as if we have room for improvement. One of those has to do with leadership in nursing education. So although you saw at one of the former slides that overall across our programming, we're approaching our diversity goals. But when we look at leadership positions, such as the DNP program, we are falling far short of that. And that has some really important implications for the next generation of leaders. And so this is one of the areas in which we have much more work that needs to be done. So how do we go about getting this work achieved? One of the areas in which I've been spending time over the last 5 years relates to pipeline development programs. We know that underrepresented minorities experience a number of structural barriers to success in higher education. It has been well established as it relates to educational attainment. Systematic bias, structural racism has contributing to specific patterns in terms of economic and educational disadvantage that does create barriers to entry into higher education. And so one of the ways in which the National Institutes of Health, as well as other government organizations, have sought to remedy that is the development of pipeline diversity programs. So these pipeline programs are aimed at providing funds and resources to institutions of higher education, in which they're asked to implement best evidence-based and innovative programs meant to improve our ability to both engage, recruit, and retain diverse students from diverse backgrounds across the health sciences disciplines, and in particular areas of research. UIC, there are a number of diversity pipeline initiatives, and when we speak about these programs, they really do focus on a broad range of diversity issues. You will see some programs that are focused on race and ethnicity as it relates to the Hispanic Center of Excellence. Our Birch Fellowship program is looking at increasing women in health sciences. We see programs that are focused on faculties who are improving research skills of faculty who are serving minorities serving institutions. So these pipeline development programs are ubiquitous, they're well-funded, and have been moving us in the right direction. But many of these pipeline programs suffer from what we call a leaky pipeline. So regardless of the area in which you see the pipeline development programs, there is this process of leakage that is a source of problem for the programs. Here's an example as it relates to chemistry. So when we look at the proportion of African Americans in chemistry, when we look at the proportion of Black students who enter college as first years, we see this about 13.4%, which is fairly equivalent to the population rates in the United States. But we see that leakage all the way through the entire pipeline, especially as we go into higher and more advanced levels of education. To the point at the end of these pipelines, we see less than 2% of um, chemistry professors in the United States are Black or African American. That's a tremendous level of leakage. And I don't have similar data for the nursing pipeline, but we can anticipate that it would be very similar to the numbers that we're seeing here. Okay. So why the leakage? Why do we see such leakage in our pipeline programs? One of the things that we're identifying is that the majority of pipeline programs focus on academic readiness and professional development. And while we know that academic skills and research skills and basic clinical skills are highly instrumental to success in higher education, the most recent research is highlighting the point, the issue of extra academic factors that are contributing to high rates of attrition or leaving the disciplines or higher education. Again, those factors that are contributing to leakage, if you will. So there was a study that was a longitudinal study of survey of freshmen, and they were looking at the factors that were contributing to students dropping out of college, and racial bias, experiences with racial bias was very strongly associated with attrition rates. And this was even true if you, after you accounted for level of prior education, GPA, and other factors. So even among very high performing and high achieving underrepresented minorities, social factors such as bias and racism contributed to their premature dropout and leaving the programs. There was recently a study that was an integrated review of Black nursing students that were being educated, that had been educated at predominantly white institutions. And they, across that body of research, this review found that isolated 4 themes that were common to the experiences and associated with either dissatisfaction with their program, perceived lack of support, or early withdrawal from the program. They found that it was themes related to social isolation, issues related to faculty relationships, the need for additional support, and factors associated with the climate. And so, although pipeline development programs are almost again exclusively focused on academic related endpoint, we see that it's the social, emotional, and contextual factors that are being identified as students as the most significant sources of barriers to success in achieving higher education. Let's focus on social isolation. This is an area, I'm trained as a clinical psychologist, and this is one of the areas in which psychologists have been focusing on in terms of pipeline development programs and the failure of our programs. So social isolation is, again, an issue that is being raised continuously. Some of the factors associated with social isolation has to do with the issue of being one of the only one. Again, having very few other people in the program who look like you, being among the first in your family to go on to higher education, so not having that familiar family background and support and specific knowledge as it relates to higher education. So you're living in and working in an area that your family members have little experience with, which separates you from that natural source of social support. They also point to instructors' lack of familiarities for students from diverse backgrounds and their inability to provide strong relationships and as well as mentorship, experiences of microaggressions, to name just a few. So again, you see the factors that are associated with social isolation, and again, with social isolation being a major barrier to success, again, that has nothing to do with academic preparedness. Again, it's an extra academic and institutional barrier to success. We see this with students. We also see the same thing with our faculty who are underrepresented minority. And again, in nursing, that includes African Americans, Latinx populations, as well as males. But when we think about it across the board, In terms of health sciences, we also think about women, we think about persons with disabilities, as well as members of the LGBT population. So while the examples I may be giving are related to race, ethnicity, this only one and this sense of social isolation can be present across a number of identity groups. So underrepresented minority and other minorities in higher education are often experience challenges related to solo status. Again, you get this connection with social isolation, being one of just you. Some of the extra stressors experienced by underrepresented minority and faculty in general is the high numbers of service requests associated with diversity across campus, right? Again, there are so few faculty from diverse backgrounds that those faculties that are available have the burden of additional service that goes over and beyond what the typical faculty experience. Because there are so few faculty on campus and in departments, students come to those faculty for support, mentorship, and guidance, even if they're not in the same program, even if they're not even their students themselves. Underrepresented minority faculty also report experiences with dynamics related to sexism and racism in the classroom setting, which can impact classroom and teaching ratings, which have a direct impact on ability to obtain tenure. There's been systematic studies that have shown that underrepresented minorities, as well as women who are in the health sciences, have consistently lower ratings compared to males and white white faculty. So again, institutional barriers that stand in the way of success that are over and above what the stresses and strains of just being a typical faculty member. And again, issues related to visibility, invisibility, and belonging. And this happens not just at the assistant level or the lower levels. This happens all across the professorial pipeline. So just recently, I volunteered at the vaccination clinic in the UI health system. I repeatedly had individuals who asked to speak to someone else who could answer their questions, even though that I had volunteer on, I had, was there trained and there to provide assistance. People, especially older white males, intentionally asked to speak to someone other than myself when they had questions. So again, this happens across these types of indignities and microaggressions happen across the educational pipeline as well as the professorial ranks. Okay, so when we think about this leaky pipeline, well, again, a lot of times our efforts are focused on academic preparedness, and that is crucial. But again, as we look at the data, we see that social isolation is critical. Studies suggest that it's contributing to a sense of isolation, depression, diminished self-esteem, and higher rates of attrition. So we look at our pipeline, we see attrition related to institutional barriers due to lack of support in terms of attending schools, poor mentorship, which has implications for both graduating and success in navigating the college curriculum, poor lack of expectations for underrepresented minorities to go on to higher education has implication for recruitment and support going into the DNP and the PhD programs. And again, institutional barriers such as isolation and poor mentorship, creating difficulties for achieving tenure. We see where the pipeline leaks, and we're now having a better understanding of the factors contributing to the leakage. So what can we do to address some of these institutional barriers to success among underrepresented minority students and faculty? First and foremost is looking at strategies to reduce social isolation, right? The research suggests that establishing a significant representation of diversity across the board, and in particularly high percentages, what they call a critical mass of underrepresented students and faculty is important. Critical mass has been established at about 15% of the student or faculty or staff population. And that's why you saw in our diversity goals that we set our benchmarks at 15% to help us achieve that critical mass point in which there's this increased sense of social support and inclusion. How have we been having success in doing that? Holistic reviews and admission processes have been instituted here in the college. That's one of the driving factors for contributing to that increase in overall diversity that we've seen over the last decade. There has been a lot of research that's come out of the College of Nursing that points to the success in that, with no detrimental impact for graduation rates, as well as passing NCLEX or overall GPAs. So we focus with holistic admissions, we focus on things in addition to GPA, SAT scores. We also look at other indicators of leadership, persistence, as well as other types, non-academic types of success. Those are things that are less negatively impacted by structural sources of oppression, and again, give us a wider indication of the skill sets of an individual, and that's been successful. The other thing that we are focusing on more recently is cohort admissions. Again, bringing on cohorts of faculty as well as postdoctoral fellows that come in as a cohort, which helps to reduce social isolation and increases support and mentoring, as well as provides that supported transition from postdoctoral training to the assistant professor positions. So those are two of the initiatives that we've been working on that are addressing social isolation and diversification of our student and faculty body. One of the things that we also saw in terms of the literature was the lack of targeted student resources. And so we have been, over the past year since I've been in this position, we've been focusing on offering tailored student success activities that are focusing on improving the emotional climate here in the College of Nursing. Examples of those activities are Time to Talk lectures, our Meet and Learn series, as well as our ongoing cultural workshops that have been offered by the Urban Health Program. We've been focusing on building faculty skills as it relates to recognizing and dealing with microaggressions, providing training to improve the mentorship needs of faculty, and also providing very targeted student support, such as the summer mentoring programs, our student success planning, as well as an upcoming and proposed student success center, which we anticipate having available for students once we return from the, everyone returns to campus. Again, when we look at the literature, we also see issues related to lack of appropriate mentorship. When we look at mentoring, we know that there's been a lot of training, and we all recognize the importance of mentorship, but one size mentorship does not fit all. We know that students in general, coming in as a freshman or coming in as junior level nursing students, there are some general skills that are specific to all the students. But as we look at differences between the different disciplines in terms of freshman students, or even the different specialties in nursing, that we see that there are discipline or specialty area specific needs that require specific mentorship needs. On top of that, we have identified the unique needs of underrepresented minority students in terms of navigating higher education. So focusing on understanding the mentorship hierarchy and becoming better equipped at providing targeted and culturally appropriate mentorship to address the unique needs of our diverse student body. Currently, we are piloting a mentorship program through the Office of Equity and Inclusion. It is focused on the students who are participating in our urban health program. The urban health program is, again, another pipeline development program. It is to increase the number of underrepresented minority students who are in the health sciences. There is College of Nursing has an urban health program, as well as the 6 additional urban health sciences program. So embedded within the urban health program is this new mentorship pilot project that we're focusing on. The purpose of the mentorship program is to provide additional support and guidance for students from diverse backgrounds. It's focusing on building a community of students in nursing to increase a sense of belonging, satisfaction, and again, focusing on issues of resiliency and persistence so that we're able to stop the leaks in our pipeline, so that we're able to encourage students to go on to not just finish their bachelor's, but go on to master's, DNP, and PhD preparedness, so that we're able to contribute to the diversification of the next generation of leaders in nursing. So the mentorship pilot program, and we're in our 2nd week. It's a semester long, so it's 15-week program. Here's a brief overview of the weekly program. We have 3 facilitators. It includes our 2 Bridges to Faculty postdoctoral fellows, as well as Cerise Smith. And it's focused on socialization, education of students and skill building, group discussion, and community building, journal reflection writing, where students are asked to apply the information that they're learning to their own needs, as well as goal setting and planning for how they will utilize the information with the struggles that they have in their daily lives. So here's just a handful of the weekly mentorship topics that we're focused on. You will see in the different colored highlighted topics, you will see some differences. So again, we have those 3 tiers of needs for mentorship. At that base level, we have basic knowledge that all students need: finding a mentor, improving our study skills, better understanding how to navigate higher education. Those are skills that are general to all students. We also have skills that are germane to students as they are moving into higher education. Persistence in the face of adversity, those where the curriculum and demands get higher, more stringent, being able to persevere and increase resilience. And then you will see that there are topics that are related to being one of an underrepresented minority, and having to deal with the unique stressors that are associated with that. Again, belonging uncertainty, stereotypes, threat, and issues related to leadership. So those are the weekly topics. We're doing an evaluation, and we hope to be able to disseminate those findings sometime over the summer as we think about how to build on and expand our ability to close off the leakage in our pipeline. The last thing that I'll focus on is some of the work that we've been doing here on campus, some of the work that I've been involved in terms of to disseminate some of the best strategies that we have for pipeline development program. We see that there are strategies and approaches from the health sciences that help us to address what we've seen as emerging structural and institutional barriers to academic success. Putting together institutes that are focused on structural violence and structural barriers to success, moving beyond the focus on the individual and to the social determinants of health, and including that mindset and framework as we think of the social determinants, the institutional and structural barriers of success in higher education, so that again we can become a leader not just in nursing research, but again those workforce development goals of achieving excellence in not just training nurses, but training nurses from diverse backgrounds. So in conclusion, just want to say that in the College of Nursing, all of you who are here are in some way involved in the excellence that is the College of Nursing. And as we move forward with the further diversifying the workforce, each of us will be involved with helping to change the climate, the overall climate, both in the College of Nursing, in the hospital settings, and other our clinical sites, so that we're able to increase the skills, the abilities, and the acceptance of our nursing leaders from diverse backgrounds. So thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to open it up now for dealing with any questions or comments, or hopefully lots of discussion that's beyond my voice. So thank you for your participation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. Let's give Phoenix a round of applause for their outstanding presentation. Yay.
Thank you.
All right, so now let's open up for questions from the audience. Remember to please submit your questions through the chat box, and I will go ahead and read them to Phoenix. So the first question from Colleen Cordy: if you could pick one thing faculty could do as a starting point to reduce the leaky pipeline, what would you recommend?
Okay, so the interesting part about, thank you, Colleen. The interesting part about that question is that both of us, all of us here, intersect with the pipeline at different levels and at different places. And that I do not think that there will be a one size fits all, other than to making sure that we are creating a climate which is welcoming and inclusive, and with barriers to success removed. But as we think about it at the different junctures where those of you who are involved in education and training, let's think about that as a group. Where are some of the places in which we can help start to identify and stop those pipeline leakages? Let's start with those of you who are at the level of recruitment. Where are some and enrollment into the nursing program? Where are some of the ways that we can plug that pipeline from those freshmen who have shown interest in nursing to those who actually apply at the end of their sophomore years? What's needed there? Just come on off of mute, let's talk. I see someone said, go ahead. Gina?
I would say, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry, I love this conversation. I'm actually a BSN graduate of UIC from 1999. Yes, and yes, the urban health program was around back then, but all of these wonderful services, I wish they were around when I was there. I was one of 3 Latinas, all female, no Latino men from my graduating class, and I saw the numbers, so I'm glad that those numbers have changed over time. But to address your question, Dr. Matthews, I think that, you know, helping students just get an application together that is a high quality application. I don't know the logistics of how that would happen, you know, whether it's connecting with alumni of color. And I think I saw a comment, I think from Nick Press, saying, how can I get involved as a graduate? And I would say, as alumni, dedicating ourselves to helping those students of that.
Oh, I think we've had an internet issue. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think that's a great suggestion. So having faculty and alumni who are interested, being willing to help the undergraduate students with their applications, with their job interview, and with their interview skills, providing with additional mentorship opportunities and potentially clinical training and observation activities that help those students to build their resumes and their CVs and their experiences. Again, those are some of the things that differentiate some of our top applicants from some of the other ones. And so alumni play a really vital role in those areas. All right, next up, retention. What are some of the things that we can do for retention for undergraduate to stop that program, stop the leakage? We had a former student talk about the importance of services and programming, and that's an area that we've been paying increased attention to. Are there other ideas about that?
Intrusive mentoring.
Intrusive mentoring. Colleen, those of you who do not share, those of us here who do not share that inside joke with us, you want to talk a little bit about that? You and Kate?
I was hoping I put that in one of the questions for you to describe, if you would, please.
Okay, mentoring. Mentorship, again, we saw that hierarchy of mentorship. One of the things that we have to, as mentors, we have to recognize is that not all of our students have come with the same set of experiences, and there's not a one size fits all. The research shows us that our first generation, our underrepresented minority students, when they start to, because of the social issues, when they start to experience difficulty, they don't plug in, they step back, and as a way of self-protection. And so that stepping back is not necessarily avoidance, but there's almost a doubling down in the isolation and efforts to get ahead, but that becomes counterproductive at some point when you need to tap into other types of resources. So Claude Steele talked about this really important aspect of mentoring. And I think that this implies not only to underrepresented minorities, but to students from diverse backgrounds in general. It's called intrusive advising. That means if you don't wait for your student to show up, you call them, you get them into your program, you talk to them very frankly about some of the things that they need from you, encouraging them to be very, very partnering with you to achieve success in the program. And then not being afraid to say, you know what? You have set your sights too low. You're just wanting to graduate this program, but I want you in the PhD program. So cut it out and let's go, put the application in. So that's an example of, with love, intrusive advising. Other questions?
Thank you for that extreme example.
Okay, so our next question is from Harleen Perlman. How would you suggest a student to deal with friends and parents who do not understand why they chose to attend college?
So again, that's one of the things that we see is that first, the struggles of first generation college students in general. I don't know that this is specific to underrepresented minorities. I think this is a first generation issue and a non-traditional student issue. I think that one of the things that we do is that we name the types of additional struggles that students can have, and that we provide opportunities for student interaction, affinity groups for example, student support groups for students who are the first in their families to be attending higher education, or to talk about that in some of our orientation sessions in the preparatory phases of entering our program. We can talk about the diverse needs of our student body and how where they may not anticipate struggles. Not to say that it's prescriptive, that it's necessarily means that they will have problems, but there's an increased likelihood of these types of barriers and that there are resources for those, right? So really being able to name it for students and support them in their efforts to get resources and to form relationships with similar types of students.
All right. As faculty, how do you strike a balance between offering enough support to URM students and not making them feel like we are treating them as a special group?
So I think at this point, now treating them as a special group, that's an interesting comment. One of the things that we haven't done well enough is to recognize their specialness. What do I mean by that? The fact that students, some of our underrepresented minorities, especially who come from the Chicago area, are coming from some of the same communities, under-resourced communities, that many of the patients that we see experiencing high levels of health disparities are seeing. That means high levels of violence in those communities. That can mean low educational resources. That can mean systematic sort of divestment from their communities. And so there's can be sometimes a resiliency, yes, can be a resiliency, and sometimes there can be some vulnerabilities associated with that. And so helping students to understand that their backgrounds are a source of resiliency for them, but there are other types of resiliencies that need to be developed to be successful in this environment. So helping them to pull from those experiences and from their lifetime and historically, but also helping them to frame them here in the current setting. So getting back to the question, we do things like talk about health inequalities without talking about the structural barriers that contribute to those. And so as we started to become more aware of health inequalities a decade ago, we would just report terrible statistic after terrible statistic, not putting it in context. That had a very detrimental impact on our minority students who were sitting in there, because we have as a framework as an individual responsibility for health and poor health, where we know now that it is an institutional, structural, and social determinants that have even a larger impact. So we do have to protect our students. We have to protect our students by not saying things that contribute to trauma, that contribute to microaggressions. We have to protect our students. And we also have to protect them, help them to feel that they are just like any other students, that they belong socially in our program. So treating them like they're not special, you belong here, and recognizing those aspects that are special and need to be protected and encouraged and enhanced in the classroom setting. That makes sense? You got me thinking about it. Yeah, okay.
All right. Here's another question from Agatha Gallo. How has the COVID-19 pandemic influenced the admissions of URM students, specifically related to financial issues?
Boy, who's here? Who can answer that? Kate, can you answer that?
Right now, our admissions do not look too dissimilar from previous years in numbers. I have not seen a breakdown by racial or ethnic status.
Okay, all right. But we can anticipate that, right? We can anticipate that some of our first generation students, if their parents have had difficulties with employment over this past year, that the financial resources may not be there for them to go to either college this year or go to UIC this year. So we can anticipate that. Some families have to do much more caretaking. We hear from that, especially from some of our Latinx communities. Our students having to participate in childcare of the younger children who are at home. So there are unique experiences that are some of our students from more diverse backgrounds are experiences and may have implications for their enrollment. Certainly the level of stress that they experience during the semester. And again, the amount of a willing ear to help problem solve and guide will be required.
This is from Sarah Fitz. Are there ways you recommend we can best support our students, especially underrepresented minorities, during these weeks when we are rarely, if ever, on campus? I worry about isolation with respect to all students during the pandemic, but even more so for URM students, given the sense of isolation URM experience in their educational pursuits at baseline.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. Cerise is on this call, as well as I think at some point Alicia might have been, but I still see Cerise. Cerise, in many of our time to talks, one of the things that we do here is how socially isolated students feel. And this is different types of social isolation beyond what some of our underrepresented minority students can feel. This is literal isolation, right? Not having the ability to get together with their classmates. Surprisingly enough, one of the things that we're hearing is the juniors are recognizing that their inability to socialize with seniors has been detrimental for them in terms of their professional development, their comfort in navigating the program. And so the things that we can really try to do is, if we can try to put more seniors involved to connect them with groups of juniors, that would be very helpful based on what we're hearing directly from the students. They want to have contact with the seniors.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is
No, that's
Cecilia.
okay.
We see that also in Springfield. It's definitely something we've seen in evaluations, and when we do have opportunities for them to be together, even on Zoom, they very much appreciate it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so right now, they've seen those sort of body systems work very well in a variety of different programs, and sounds like something like that would even be more welcome, especially as we struggle with the pandemic. Pairing up juniors and seniors, having them meet once a week to, just to provide mentorship and help answer questions.
All right, question from Monique Reed. How do you identify students for mentorship? Do they self-identify or are they selected?
Any student who comes to you with saying they need a mentor and they have a list of mentorship needs, they're okay. It's the student, you want to mentor them, right? Those are fantastic. But it's the student who seems to be the most disconnected that you want to be reaching out to, right? And so sometimes we think, oh, the go-getter. But again, that's a part of that intrusive mentoring. We're looking around your room and seeing who's falling through the cracks. Get them connected. Those of us who are in the classroom, we have relationships with some of our students that are a little bit closer than other students. And so one of the things that you can do is say, student X, I recognize you as a leader in this class. I see that there are 2 or 3 students who seem to be not plugged in. Can I ask you to help with that plugging in, right? And that's, again, these are types of roles that students like to play with one another. That type of student to student contact and mentorship and guidance is well received. And so you can use your TAs or teaching assistants, some of the students in your class that you've had for multiple semesters and haven't gotten to know pretty well, right? Charge them with roping folks in.
All right, let's just do one more question just to be mindful of everyone's time. This is from Jennifer Glazer. Are students with disabilities included in eligible for pipeline and bridge to faculty pathways?
Yes, absolutely. The pilot program that we had started this spring is specific to urban health program. And that, again, we had students who are non-URM who are participating. They just signed up. But what we're looking to see is how impactful this program is. And then if we're finding it has the type of success that we are looking for in terms of increasing engagement and retention, then we're hoping to look for funding to offer something that is much wider, that we can disseminate much wider. But I think that there's something about a mandated program for all students and something that feels like it's tailored for the needs of students who have issues around belonging. And so I think students who are LGBTQ, who are religious minorities, who come from different disability backgrounds, again, would benefit from this type of mentorship program. So I imagine it in the future being very inclusive. Because again, our workforce development is 2-pronged. It's diversity in general, all the identities, and also paying particular attention to those groups that are underrepresented in nursing, African-American males and Latinx populations. So again, if we get this right, and if it does the things that we hope it will do, we'll build it bigger. And that's something that some of you can help provide support with as well. Steve will talk about that with you.
Happy to.
And that concludes our Q&A portion of this webinar. Thank you once again, Dr. Matthews, for this discussion. Let's give Dr. Mack another round of applause.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your willingness and your participation.
Yes, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. Just a few closing remarks before we conclude. As you know, those who attended today's session are eligible to receive 1.25 contact hours of continuing education credit. Everyone who attended today will receive an email by the end of the week with a web survey that's required for you to fill out in order for you to obtain your CEs. So just be on the lookout for that. This event was part of our ongoing web series called On Duty. Please be sure to visit go.uic.edu/news-events to see upcoming events in the series, as well as other events being planned for our alumni, faculty, and friends. One such event is happening on March 4th when our retiring dean, Dr. Terry Weaver, will present her much celebrated career as a researcher of sleep health in conjunction with the college's virtual research day. So be sure to check out the website for details on that. Also, we're calling for nominations for UIC College of Nursing Alumni Awards. The deadline for nominating your favorite colleague, classmate, or friend is coming up on February 1st. Please contact me if you have any questions, if you have anyone you want to submit for that. Also visit our website for that. If anyone is interested in getting more involved with the college or joining the Nursing Alumni Board, please also contact me. Lastly, please be sure to save the date for Alumni Reunion 2021, which is scheduled for October 16th. We hope that it will be an in-person event. However, if we need to do it virtually like we did last fall or some sort of a hybrid version, we'll be well prepared to do so. So please save that date, stay tuned for details. As always, contact me with any questions. That wraps up our On Duty with Dr. Phoenix Matthews. Let's give them one more round of applause. Yes. And thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to join us. Take care.